2 weeks after a 5-year-old boy and his grandparents disappeared, Calgary police announced today what no one wanted to hear, that they will be laying murder charges, turning a missing persons investigation into a homicide investigation. It was Monday, June 30th, that Nathan O'Brien's mother went to pick up her son from a sleepover at the home of his grandparents, Catherine and Alvin Lickness, only to find all three of them missing. Police have been searching for them ever since, and sources tell CBC News that Douglas Garland was rearrested and is the person who will be charged. The CBC's Carolyn Dunn has more on those charges. Carolyn?
Wendy, Calgary police say they will be laying 2 first-degree murder charges in the deaths of Alvin and Catherine Lickness. That charge indicates intent or premeditation, and 1 second-degree murder charge in the death of 5-year-old Nathan O'Brien. It fell to Calgary's police chief to announce the grim news.
The preponderance of evidence is such that has led our investigators to believe that they are dead.
He says there is simply no hope 5-year-old Nathan O'Brien and his grandparents, Catherine and Alvin Lickness, could be found alive. They've been missing for 2 weeks, forcibly removed from the Licknesses' Calgary home, evidence of a violent struggle left at the scene.
We're very hopeful.
Just days ago, hundreds gathered at a vigil, wearing green ribbons as a symbol of hope they would be found alive. Now, as a makeshift memorial grows at the Lickness home, the truth is setting in.
So to have such a young child taken from a home here is really horrifying.
I have a grandson his age, so, it's heart-wrenching. I can't imagine what they're going through. It's just beyond, and then just the whole thing is just a terrible, terrible situation.
Police know they have delivered a terrible blow to the family by announcing murder charges.
It's extremely tragic. It's devastated them. We've kept them apprised the whole time. I think it's safe to say that even as the days went by, there's always a hope. There's always a glimmer of hope. And unfortunately, with the laying of the charges, we've taken that hope away from the family. So they are devastated.
Police will not confirm the identity of who is being charged until the charges are laid. But sources close to the investigation tell CBC News 54-year-old Douglas Garland was arrested this morning and will be charged. This closed-circuit video of a green truck led police to an acreage in Airdrie, Alberta, owned by Garland's parents. For days, police searched that property and other sites in the area. And there are other links. Our sources say Douglas Garland and Alvin Lickness had an acrimonious business dispute over a patent. A junior gas company, which Alvin Lickness owned, went bankrupt just days before the family went missing. All of those lines of investigation are being pursued by police, but the priority now, they say, is to find the bodies of Nathan O'Brien and Alvin and Catherine Lickness, because despite the massive searches, despite the pending charges, there are still no sign of their remains. And Wendy, no closure for their families.
Thanks, Carolyn. The CBC's Carolyn Dunn in Calgary. Retired homicide investigator Dave Perry is back with us again tonight to help us better understand this very unusual investigation. So, Dave, I want to get your reaction to a couple of moments from that press conference with Calgary Police Chief Rick Hansen this afternoon, and one in particular at the very beginning when he made that announcement where pretty much everyone watching gasped. This is it.
At approximately 1:30 a.m. today, officers arrested a man in the Airdrie area. He is currently in custody, and charges of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of second-degree murder are pending.
So 3 murder charges, and yet no bodies have been found. What was your reaction hearing that today?
Well, I think everybody had that gasp right across the country when they heard that news. And I think the only thing that could have made it worse was to hear the news that it is now a murder investigation, a triple murder investigation, and the fact that there are no bodies, that the bodies have not yet been recovered. I can't imagine how much more difficult that makes it for the family.
How unusual is that the charges could be laid without bodies being found?
Well, it's not common, but I can tell you it does happen from time to time where there is evidence that's gathered that can prove that somebody's responsible for a murder before the bodies are recovered. And we had a recent case in the Toronto area where a little girl was abducted named Tori Stafford, and there was a similar situation there. There were 2 people arrested and charged And it was at least a week or two before the body was recovered.
Now, Douglas Garland, he was arrested last week on other charges, and then on Friday night, he was released. What could be going on with that?
Well, it tells me a couple of things. The first being that perhaps they didn't have enough evidence to charge him. And that might have simply been the case at that time. The other thing is that the police may have had some evidence or been quite suspicious about his behavior and simply wanted to have him out and have him under observation to see if that would help them gain any significant evidence to move the case forward.
The bodies haven't been found, so safe to assume, I suppose, that the suspect is not cooperating.
I think it's a safe assumption that the suspect is not cooperating to the point where he's disclosing where he disposed of bodies, absolutely.
So I want to get your reaction to another moment from that press conference today, and this is basically where the police chief turned to the public to ask for their help in finding the bodies. Have a listen.
We are asking for the assistance of anybody who is on an acreage, anybody who's a business person, oil companies that have access to land, to continue to be vigilant in looking for anything that's unusual.
So that seems to suggest that they have no idea where the bodies are.
I think the chief was very clear that they don't have any idea where the bodies are. And I think it's very appropriate. As I said, it's easier to know where the beginning of a search is within the crime scene, followed up by a suspect's address or a suspect's property. But once all of the usual methods fail to recover the bodies, then you have to determine where to go next. So the chief is simply asking the public to get out en masse instead of having hundreds of police officers searching in grid patterns in potential known areas. Now he's asking the public to get out. And what we should have happen is that we've got tens of thousands of people that are now searching for these bodies.
How big a search could that be?
Well, I think it's massive. There's already been extraordinary search efforts, as large as I've seen in this country in a long time. And now that the bodies haven't been recovered, I think that the search is going to expand. And who knows where it's going to take them. But finding human bodies sounds like a fairly easy task, but I can tell you through my experience, it's one of the most difficult things to do. It is truly like finding a needle in a haystack. Our country is so big, and there's so much open space, we just have no idea where they might be. But I am confident that in time, and hopefully in a short time, that they will be recovered.
We haven't been given much detail on what they found inside the house, but they did describe it as a violent scene, so presumably there's some clues in that as well.
Well, it was described as a violent crime scene, and it was also described as a scene that gave evidence that these people did not leave, voluntarily. So that tells me as an investigator that there's some good forensic opportunities within that crime scene to assist the police.
Well, it must be terrible telling a family about a murder, but to not be able to give them answers or even point to a body must make it worse.
It's your worst day in policing for sure when you have to tell a family this kind of news, and followed up by the fact that there's not even that component where you can say at least we've recovered your loved ones. But I can assure you that every effort that the police can undertake is being undertaken, and they will recover these bodies.
Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Dave Perry, thank you. To other news now, and record-breaking heat